Morning. Thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone about the house rules. Please keep your microphone muted unless you want to speak. If you wish to express your thoughts, please type them in the chat box or raise your hand and wait to be called. You may also use Chinese subtitle features of Google Meet. Okay. Taiwan's Ministry of Education has been advocating for the use of English as a medium of instruction in higher education through a program entitled Bilingual Education for Students in College, and also known as BEST. In line with this, the Center for Research on Bilingual Education at National Taipei University of Education has dedicated today for the professional development of university professors who are teaching freshman English and English English for academic purposes, or ESP courses. This morning's program will be a sharing of best practices and resources for English teaching. We are honored to have with us today two esteemed speakers who will be sharing best practices and resources for English teaching, Xreading. The first session for today is the benefits of doing extensive reading online with Xreading, and it will be presented by Paul Goldberg. Paul has an MA degrees in education and TESOL, and has completed the coursework for EDD and TESOL, so ABD and TESOL, doctoral in education. And he has taught in Venezuela, Spain, Korea, the US, and most recently in Kwansei Gakuin University in Japan. Okay. His main areas of interest are extensive reading and extensive listening. Finally, Paul is the founder of Xreading, which he developed because of his desire to make graded readers more accessible for students and extensive reading programs easier for teachers to manage. Let us all welcome Paul Goldberg.
Dr. Chen, thank you very much for that introduction. And I'm new to Google Meet, but I'm going to try to do my best. I've gotten some good training here, so hopefully, let's see, share entire screen, just what I did before. Okay, can you now see?
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you, everyone.
It's not on full screen, though.
It should, hold on, sorry, I'm not sure. Oh, how about now?
Yes, you're ready.
Okay, great. And I'm just trying to. Okay, thank you very much for that introduction. My name is Paul Goldberg. I am based in Japan. As you probably guessed, I'm not Japanese. I'm originally from New York, and I've taught for many years and often use extensive reading and found it's extremely beneficial. And therefore, I developed an online system for my students, which ended up becoming an unintentional company that's now being used at hundreds of high schools and universities around the world. And I'd like to share with you some of my knowledge regarding extensive reading. Okay. I assume most of us are English teachers. I think there's a way to chat here. I'm going to ask, or you don't have to actually answer this. I'm going to assume most of you, like me, want to be the best and most effective teacher you can be by helping your students improve their language ability. Okay, and I'm going to share with you some ideas that I think will be very effective for you. Okay, first of all, I think as English teachers or English learners, we've always dreamed of that magic pill, the English pill, that you could take the pill and suddenly you know English perfectly. Wouldn't that be wonderful? But unfortunately, no magic English pill exists. Okay? The truth is, learning English is not easy. Like learning any language is not going to be easy. It requires a lot of hard work. Okay, and as all of us, well, everybody I'm talking to, I believe, has learned English as a second language, or a foreign language, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It takes time and effort, but there are some methods that are more effective than others. Okay, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. But first, learning a language requires what? What is the fundamental point of learning a language? What is the fundamental building block? If I was in a room with you, I'd ask you to yell out answers. Probably easier on online for me just to give you the answer. Vocabulary. Of course, grammar, pronunciation, things like that are important. But if a student doesn't have any words, they're not going to be able to use a language. Okay. So how can someone learn vocabulary? Well, there's the usual method, which I call direct study. Okay, direct study is having a list of words or word cards. Very traditional, and it's quick and easy. Okay, it's very fast. Students, if I give my students 20 words on Monday and give them a test on Friday, they will almost certainly be able to answer all the questions correctly. However, there's some limitations. Number one, the understanding is very shallow. I think as teachers, we know that words have more than one meaning and many uses, but that is not conveyed by the use of word cards or direct study usually. Also, it's quickly forgotten. Like I said, if I give my students 20 words on Monday and give them a test on Friday, they'll probably do well, but the following Monday, most students are going to forget most of those words. So I would argue this is not actually learning. What's going on here is memorizing. And as teachers, we know memorizing is not what we want. We want learning. Okay? So for actual learning to happen requires something I call recycling. I don't mean putting your garbage in the correct bin, plastics and paper, things like that. I mean, in this context, using or students seeing the same words used again and again and again, but in different contexts. Okay? And really the only way to achieve that is through reading. So I think reading, while it may be slower than direct study, intentional study of vocabulary, is actually going to lead to better learning. Okay, and there's lots of research, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later on, but some of the research shows if students read 200,000 words, they will see a significant improvement in their English ability. But 200,000 words is a lot, okay? So you want to do it in the best way possible, but unfortunately, not all reading is equally beneficial. Okay, for example, these are some very popular textbooks in Japan. I don't know if these are as popular in Taiwan, although I suspect they are. These are very good for learning grammar rules and maybe seeing some important vocabulary. But are they going to give students the 200,000 words they need? Well, can you guess each of these popular textbooks, how many words total, running words, are in the book? In other words, if a student wants to read every word in Unlocked or Interchange, how many words would they see? Not 200,000, not 5, only 10,000 words. So if a student needs 200,000 words of input, they're not going to get it from these textbooks. Okay, these textbooks are useful, but not for giving students the amount of reading they need. How about these books and magazines? These have lots of words. A student can get 200,000 words by reading 2 books. However, as I'm sure you can guess, they're going to be too difficult for the vast majority of our students. Okay, so the answer, I believe, is extensive reading. Okay, that's what students need if they're going to get the amount of reading that they need to improve their English ability. Okay, well, what exactly is extensive reading? Well, there's entire textbooks explaining exactly what it is. I have abbreviated it to one sentence. the practice of reading large quantities of text that is easy to understand. Okay, it's based on Stephen Krashen's input hypothesis, which basically says if students are exposed to large quantities of language that they understand, they will begin to acquire that language. Comprehensible input is what he called it. I probably you've heard about it if you've studied to be an English teacher. I believe Stephen Krashen is quite influential in Taiwan. And so you probably know about his input hypothesis. And it makes perfect sense. You have to be experiencing the language if you're going to actually learn it. Okay. It goes in contrast to intensive reading, which is short and difficult reading passages, the kind of things students traditionally typically see in those textbooks I showed you before. The main principles, and this comes from a book from Richard Day and Julian Bamford. This is probably the best textbook explaining extensive reading, although it's quite old now. Students read for meaning as opposed to just reading for language. In other words, they're reading to understand a story. The text has few unknown words. The emphasis is on fluency over accuracy. Students should be reading as quickly as possible as long as they understand the story. The text is relatively long, and therefore graded readers are ideal, and I'll explain later what graded readers are. And students often select their own stories, not required, but it makes it more enjoyable for them. Okay, the benefits of doing extensive reading. Number one, students see a purpose to reading, which is to engage with a story. Something that I believe humans everywhere like to do, whether it was 10,000 years ago listening to our elders tell stories around a fire to watching Netflix or Amazon today. Students can enjoy reading. Of course, they're not going to enjoy it as, say, a day at the beach, but relative to other language learning activities. Vocabulary is recycled, which I talked about before, not just memorized. Students increase their understanding of known words, and students' reading speed and fluency improve. And this is very important. So even if students are studying primarily for a standardized test, extensive reading is going to help them because standardized tests have a reading passage and students often don't have enough time to finish that reading passage. Okay, why extensive reading is essential? Okay, there's different analogies teachers who believe in extensive reading like to give. My favorite is tennis. I don't know how many of you play tennis, but I guess everybody's familiar with the game. You've at least seen it in your life. So if I was to ask you, if someone wants to become the best tennis player they can be, what do they have to do? I guess most people would answer they have to practice the skills. And again, maybe you don't play tennis, but you can imagine the skills of tennis are backhand, forehand, serving, footwork, strategy, things like that. Okay, those are the skills. But if someone only practices the skills, do you think they're actually going to become a very good tennis player? I would argue no. They'll become good at the skills. But if they actually want to become good at tennis, they have to practice playing as well. Okay, it's probably such an obvious answer that everybody can imagine that. No tennis coach would ever tell their students, just practice the skills. Don't practice actually playing. That's not so important. That would be ridiculous. They'd probably get fired. But that's what happens all the time in language education. Memorize this vocabulary, learn these grammar rules, practice this pronunciation with very little time being devoted to using it in a meaningful way. Okay, and that's what extensive reading is all about. Giving students the ability, the time to use the skills that you've taught them in a way that has some meaning, which is to engage in a story. For those of you like more empirical evidence, there's a lot of research, like I said. One study that I like to refer to is from some researchers at Kansai University in Japan. They found that students read 200,000 words, they make statistically significant gains in their English ability. Okay, but not all reading is equal, like I said before. So if you can get your students to read just 15 minutes per day, it's going to be possible. And I'll show you why that is. So with extensive reading, a student can reach about 150 words per minute. Again, these are going to be easy books that they understand almost all the words, and after they've practiced for a few weeks. If they can read for 15 minutes, how many minutes will it take to reach the required 200,000 words? It will take 1,333 minutes. If you divide that by days, how many days will it take? About 88 days. So it's not so quick. But intensive reading, when I say intensive reading, I'm talking about something very difficult, like a newspaper article or a magazine article. What makes it difficult? Lots of unknown words. Student needs the dictionary to understand it. The dictionary has many meanings for every word. They need to go back to the story, look at the context. In that situation, the average reading speed is about 17 words per minute. If they read for 15 minutes, how long will it take to reach 200,000 words? About 11,000 minutes. If you divide that by days, over 2 years. So I think that makes a very good case why extensive reading is so important. Okay, I'm not saying get rid of intensive reading. Students need to practice both. They need to experience both. Okay, I keep saying easy. Books have to be easy. Books have to be easy. Okay, so this is going to be attendees participation time. So I'm going to ask you a question. Please think about this for a moment. If students are reading a book for extensive reading so they can improve their English, what % of the vocabulary should they understand? Okay, do you think they should understand about 60%, B 70%, C 80%, D 90%, or E 95%? Okay, again, looking at the page, what % of the words should they understand when they're going to read if they want to improve their English by extensive reading? Okay, in the chat, could you please put your answer, A, B, C, D, or E? You got A, E, big difference. A, lots of B, B, D, E, B, E, 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 B, C, A. Got lots of tough teachers here. Okay. Oh, a lot of C's coming up. C's right there in the middle. B. Okay. Okay. We can stop now. Thank you for all your answers. I'm going to share with you what the correct answer is. Okay. First of all, it's definitely not A. Sorry for everybody who said A. I know you like to be a tough teacher, but that's not going to help your students very much. It's not D. It's not B. A lot of people said C. Everybody who said C, congratulations, you're not right. Okay. Even the most correct answer is E, 95%. And I guess I saw many of you say that. So hopefully, because you've read about Steve, you've read Stephen Krashen, and even 95 or Paul Nation, even 95% is not really accurate. It should be more like 98 or 99. Now you might think, well, this is just Paul's opinion. He loves extensive reading, but maybe other teachers feel otherwise. Okay, but I'm going to show you why I'm going to back up my answer. Okay. So forget 60%. Let's look at 70%. If a student understands 70% of the text on the page, this is what they're going to see. Okay? That 30% of the words they can't understand. Clearly, they're not going to be able to read this. 80%, maybe they can get a general idea. 90%, we're getting closer. And 95%, this would be 95%. Okay, please take a moment to read this. Okay, I'll give you about 1 minute. Okay, as English teachers or highly proficient students, I'm going to assume everybody could understand what this passage is about. Okay, but let me ask you, would you enjoy reading 20 pages like this? Probably not. Okay, also, if there's about 5 words per page that you don't know and you read 20 pages, how many unknown words are you going to come across? Well, 5 times 20 is 100. Is a student going to actually learn 100 new words? No. So it actually serves no real purpose to have so many unknown words in a reading passage. Again, the idea of extensive reading is students should see words they're familiar with, but just see how they're actually being used and to read quickly and fluently and to enjoy. Okay. For those of you who are OCD like I am and you really want to see what the missing words are, here they are. Okay, but need to move on because as time is going by. So this just gives you a good idea, again, why 98% really is essential for extensive reading. Even 95% is quite low. So what does extensive reading look like? Is this extensive reading? No, this definitely is not an example of extensive reading. There is a reading passage, but it's too short, too many difficult words, exercises and activities, and even the definitions are given. This is a perfect example of intensive reading. Very worthwhile and useful activity for students, but it's not extensive reading. To do extensive reading most efficiently, effectively, really requires graded readers. Okay, these are some examples of graded readers. Graded readers are storybooks, fiction or nonfiction, written specifically for adult and young adult learners. Okay, they have a range of levels, beginner to advanced. Publishers often call them like level 1, starter, level 1, level 2. Very importantly, they're controlled for their vocabulary and grammar. Okay, in other words, these have been written specifically with understanding that at the lower level, students are going to have less vocabulary knowledge, and the vocabulary used in those books is going to be simpler. Same with the grammar. The emphasis is on the story. The de-emphasis is on the activities. In other words, these are almost like look like books with maybe a few activities at the end. And they often have audio narrations if students want to practice listening as well. Okay. So this is what a book looks like at a very easy level, just a picture and one sentence. Students can easily understand it. If there's a word they don't know, they can probably get the context from the picture. The beginning level, still pictures and a couple more sentences. Elementary, more text, but still images. Intermediate and advanced. Now, this might look like a regular book to the non-trained person, but actually it's still a graded reader. The vocabulary and grammar are restricted. Okay, how about books for native speakers? Like this is a famous children's book, especially children's book. Books look appealing, they have great artwork, but they're not really ideal. Okay, you see things like Hold Your Horses, I Spy, Hot Dog being used not as talking about food. These would be very confusing for anybody who's not really a native speaker to understand what those kind of sentences mean. Okay. Again, more empirical, this just shows the kind of vocabulary that's used in graded readers versus youth readers, readers that are made for native speakers at a young age. There's still so many more low frequency words students are not likely to know. Final word I want to have to say about extensive reading, it comes from Christine Nuttall's seminal work on what she calls the reading effect. She found with difficult books, well, students are not going to understand well. So their speed is going to be slow. If they read slowly, students typically don't enjoy reading. If they don't enjoy reading, they're going to read less. If they read less, their understanding is not going to increase. She called this a vicious cycle. The opposite, with easy books, students can understand well. If they understand well, they're going to read quickly. If they read quickly, they're going to enjoy reading. If they enjoy reading, they will read more. If they read more, their understanding will increase. She called this a virtuous cycle. And that's what we're really aiming for with extensive reading. Okay, I'm going to stop very quickly just to see if anybody has any pressing questions. I'm going to answer questions at the end, but does anybody have any questions about anything I asked at this point? No questions in the chat, or guess no. What if students dismiss easy text? Oh, good question. So the question is, what if students, so I assume you mean what if students don't want to read easy text? That's a very common problem in Japan, where they have been brought up on the idea that if you want to improve your English, you have to read difficult text. They don't understand the idea. I think the best way is really to go over with them. Obviously, students are not going to have as deep understanding of pedagogy as teachers do, but really to show them the same things I showed you earlier, especially the tennis example. You can tell a student difficult texts have a purpose, but they're not going to help you improve your reading fluency. And to improve your reading fluency is going to help your overall English ability. So that's the argument I would use with students. I'm going to continue because we don't have so much time. So while extensive reading can be very effective, there's some problems implementing it. Okay. First of all, a lack of books. You need to have sufficient number of books. If you have 100 students, you don't need 100 books. You need probably 1,000 books. If you have 1,000 students, you probably need 10,000 books because of different levels and different kinds of interest. Lack of class sets. While extensive reading is typically about students choosing their own book, there are benefits to students having the same book and reading the same book because you can do more engaging activities, discussions, and things like that. Monitoring if students are actually reading, especially if they're doing this in an academic context. Tracking and recording what books they've read. Getting students to read regularly. Okay, I was fortunate to teach at a very good university. If I told my students, please read 10 books this semester, they would all do it, but many of them would wait until the last week. So we don't want students cramming at the very end. Integrating audio. Most publishers make professional narration of their audio, of their books, but even in the year 2022, they still put the audio on a CD. I don't know in Taiwan, but I can tell you in Japan, no student is carrying around a CD player in their bag. I would say the youngest students don't even know what a CD player is anymore, so not very useful. And accessibility. Students can't always get to the library, especially these days with the pandemic, but even weekends, vacations, periods like that. Okay, so the solution to all those problems, I was frustrated year after year dealing with them. So I came up with Xreading VL, a virtual library of graded readers students can access anywhere, anytime, with no limitations. The mission is simply making extensive reading easier for us teachers, more accessible for students, and profitable for publishers, so they're willing to support a system like this. Okay, a quick overview. It's an online library of over 1,800 graded readers from almost every major publisher. It gives students unlimited simultaneous use, means every student can read every book at the same time. So it's not 1,800 books only, it's 1,800 books per student. If your school has 2,000 students, that's equivalent to over almost 2 million graded readers. Works on computers and mobile devices. We have the audio, quizzes, background information, and a standardized level system. This online library is linked to a learner management system, which I think everybody knows these days, like Google Classrooms or Microsoft Teams or Moodle. This allows teachers to track all of their students' reading progress, assess their understanding, guide their selections, and assign activities. Okay, it works on computers, works on tablets, works on smartphones. Very importantly, we use adaptive text, not PDF. On a computer or tablet, it makes very little difference. On a smartphone, it makes a huge difference. This is adaptive text. This is a PDF. Obviously, on a PDF, students can have to pinch and zoom, not very convenient for reading a whole book. We have books at 14 different levels, and as you can see, there are a lot of books at every level. And of course, a student who is at a specific level can read books at a higher or lower level. They're not limited a little bit. So if a student is at level 12, or let's say level 10, they can read level 10, level 9, level 8, and maybe even level 11. So that every student will have several hundred books at their level, wherever they are. I'll give you a quick demonstration from the student's perspective. Okay, a student will, we try to make it as simple as possible. Students sometimes get confused with technology. So they need to do three things: log in, select the book, and read. So a student logs in the first time, they see this green add book button. Very simple to find, right there in the middle of the screen. They press it, they're brought right to the library. They can browse or narrow by different criteria, such as genre, type of story, level, publisher. We've added some unique ones, for example, protagonist. So if a student wants to find every book with a female young adult protagonist, can instantly find from the library. Okay, a student can start reading immediately by pressing the green read now button, or they can go to the more information, which is supposed to be like going to the real library. Okay, here they can see the back cover summary and the metadata. How many words? Is it British English? Is it American English? Is there audio? Things like that. They can get a preview, read the first 5% of the book before checking it out. They can listen to the audio to see if how it sounds. Students often complain one of the most difficult aspects of extensive reading, especially the classics, is keeping track of all the characters. So we are in the process of creating character lists for every single book. Not only are we listing the character and who they are, you notice we also indicate the importance of the character. Okay, of course, this is subjective, but it gives students a good idea. Is this a character I need to remember, or is it somebody whose name I can forget after I've seen it once? And maybe most important are ratings. I wish I could say every graded reader in the world, at least every graded reader on Xreading is wonderful, but like everything else, some are better than others. And we really want our students to be able to find the best readers. So we let students rate books after they finish, and then other students can see those ratings, and hopefully it will lead them to the best stories. This is what it looks like on a computer. If a student says, yes, this is the book I want to read, most important to notice is the progress bar at the top. It says 0 out of 2044. A student presses next, and the progress bar moves forward. They could go back by pressing the previous button, but we will continue going forward, and you notice the progress bar moves forward. When a student stops reading, it will save their position. So if a student reads to chapter 2, and they take a break, and they log in again, it will bring them right back to chapter 2. When a student stops reading, they can see their reading data. This shows, for example, we were just reading A Little Princess. It's level 2. There's 2,044 words. The student has read 326. We don't know for sure if the student has read those words, but those are the amount of words that were on the screen. Therefore, we can calculate the percent, 16%. More importantly, in my opinion, we can track their reading. We track their reading time. In this case, 22 seconds. Therefore, we can calculate the reading speed. This is very important for two reasons. Number one is reading fluency is such an important part of extensive reading, such an important part of language acquisition. But most teachers have no idea what their students' reading speed is. This is a great way for teachers to find out what their students' reading speed is. If students are reading too slowly, try to address those problems. Maybe they're choosing books that are too difficult. Maybe they haven't learned how to chunk sentences or words together. So it's very useful. The second benefit, I don't know if cheating is a big issue in Taiwan. In Japan, it happens sometimes, not often, but it happens. And this is a great way to catch students who are trying to cheat, because when I see 445 words per minute, I am very suspicious. Okay, I don't like to be confrontational with students, so it happens every semester. On the second class, I will find at least one, usually several students, and I'll be like, hello, Toshiko, congratulations, you have read your first book in English. Tom Sawyer, 5,552 words, that's great. Except I see you read it in 2 minutes, right before class today. Could you please explain that? And she knows that she's been caught, okay? And you might think, well, students are very clever. I've heard Taiwanese students are extremely clever. And if they really want to cheat, maybe they'll find a way. They will next time log in, open the book, and then do something else. Go somewhere or go to Facebook or Instagram or whatever students are doing these days. Not going to work so easily because we have an inactivity timer built into the book. In other words, if a student opens the book and then leaves, goes to another tab, after 1 minute is a silent pop-up that says, hello, Toshiko, are you really here? If she doesn't reply immediately, the book closes automatically. Okay, I would never claim that Xreading will prevent all cheating, but it definitely makes it challenging. Okay, so I will continue on some other features for students. Number one, it's an online library. I think there are advantages to reading print books, but digital also gives advantages. For example, you can change the view settings. You can make the text larger or smaller, the margins, the spacing. You can even change the background color, which can be very useful, especially if you have students with reading accessibility issues like dyslexia. We have quizzes for every book. These quizzes are designed specifically for extensive reading. Only 5 questions, multiple choice, very easy. If a student has read the book, they're almost guaranteed to get 100 or at least pass the quiz. Students can rate books and give a review. That's where we get the book ratings from. We have a level system. We didn't create it. It's created by the Extensive Reading Foundation. But this test students can take it and it will put them on the Xreading has 14 levels. It will tell students where they belong on the 14 level system. It's created actually by a man named Tom Robb. It's quite good. It's specifically made for extensive reading. Students should start out by reading easy books. So it tends to put students at quite a low level. They should not be too surprised when that happens. Very importantly, we have audio on demand. Like I said, publishers make the audio, but they put it on a CD. Not very convenient for students in the year 2022, sorry. So with Xreading, they can just press the play button and they can listen instantly on demand. However, there are distinct differences between extensive reading and extensive listening. A major difference is speed. Who decides a student's reading speed? The student themselves. But who decides the listening speed? The speaker. And it might not match a student's ability or their speed they want to be listening at. So we have integrated this audio at 5 speeds, 10% slower, 20% slower, 10% faster, and 20% faster. But very importantly, without distortion. So it's not like just speeding up the audio on your computer's audio player or on YouTube. So I'll play a quick example. This is the speed that was provided by the publisher. It plays for about 15 seconds. Okay, please let me know. Try to read and listen while this is playing.
Chapter 1. Down the Rabbit Hole. Alice was beginning to get very bored. She and her sister were sitting under the trees. Her sister was reading, but Alice had nothing to do.
Okay, so I think most of you would agree it's probably quite slow. So we're going to speed it up the full 20%. Let's see how strange that sounds. If anybody knows Alvin and the Chipmunks, they're also 20%.
Alice was beginning to get very bored. She and her sister were sitting under the trees.
Okay, I think you'd agree that actually sounds quite natural. Just by comparison, this is the same exact speed, 20%, but without removing the distortion.
Chapter 1. Down the Rabbit Hole. Alice was beginning to get very bored. She and her sister were sitting under the trees. Her sister was reading, but Alice had nothing to do.
Okay, so I think you can hear there's a distinct difference there. Removing the distortion is very helpful. We've added a recent feature called text and audio accessibility. So if you want your students to practice reading and you don't want them to listen, you can turn off the audio. If you want them to practice listening and not reading, you can turn off the text. I don't suggest turning off both. Anyway, you can imagine if you turn off the audio, the play button disappears. What if you set it to allow audio only, no text? This is what the students will see. So they can still see the images, they can know where they are in the book, but they just can't read the story. Okay, next I want to show Xreading for teachers. These are some of the major features. Most important is viewing your students' data. So this is the classes page. I can get a quick summary of each class, how much the whole class has read. I can select a specific class and I can instantly see every student, how many books they've read, how many words they've read, how many minutes they've read, their average reading speed, and their average quiz score. I can filter this by specific dates if I want to, and I can export this data to Excel. I can then choose a specific student, and I can see every book the student has read, when they read, how much they have read. You notice there's some pink. Pink is because the teacher has set up a minimum passing score for the quiz and a maximum reading speed. In other words, the teacher doesn't have to look for every book at every student, every book. The system will automatically flag. So in this case, the student's quiz score was too low and their reading speed was too high. They will not get credit for that book. Okay. If the teacher wants to, they can override those settings override the system and change it in case the student had a problem. Live monitoring, this is a feature we added during the pandemic when teaching online, especially telling students to read and hope they really did it was almost impossible. We added a feature. So imagine you were in class and you online or even in person, and you tell your students, okay, please read now for 10 minutes. How do you know if they're really reading? Well, you can press the live monitor button here. It takes about 15 seconds and it will tell you exactly what your students are doing at this minute. Dark green, they're actually reading. Light green, they're somewhere on the website, maybe searching for a book. Gray, they're not logged in. And pink are our troublemakers. Those are the ones who have logged in recently, but there's been no activity recently in the last few seconds. And so very easy to call out students who are not reading when they're supposed to be. Teachers can restrict the library by these different criteria. For example, these are the 14 levels. If you don't want your students to see books at some of those levels, either you don't want them seeing very high level books or very low level books, you just uncheck them. For me, I told my students, please read one book a week. I don't want them choosing the easiest books. I don't want them choosing the shortest books. So I just uncheck, and the shortest book they will find is 3,000 words. Okay, let's say you want to do a class reader one week. I want all of my students to read the book Egghead. I don't know if you've heard of that book. It's it's an award-winning graded reader about bullying, which unfortunately is a big topic in Japan. So I go to select specific title. I choose only Egghead. I could choose 1 book, 5 books, anything I want, and then submit this assignment. Now this is the student side. When the student presses add book, they will see only Egghead. Okay. Another feature we have I'd like to talk about is Mreader. I don't know if you've heard of Mreader. This is another website created by Tom Rawl of the Extensive Reading Foundation. This is a free resource. It's quizzes for over 8,000 graded readers. It's free. It's very nice. The quality of the quizzes is so-so because it's written by volunteers. So you might be asking, why do we add the Mreader quizzes to Xreading? The Xreading quizzes are much better because this will allow schools to integrate their physical library into Xreading. In other words, a school doesn't need to choose physical library or digital library. They can do both. And it's very simple. There's a setting here. It says allow physical books. You turn it to yes. Okay, now let's imagine your student goes to the real library. They take out this book. This book is not in Xreading. Okay, Pirates of the Caribbean. Nice to see Johnny Depp is back in good, has got his name back in good terms. Student reads this book. Then they go to Xreading. They press add book. Because the teacher says allow physical books, they need to choose digital book or physical book. This is a physical book. They have to search for it. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Mreader, this is going to Mreader in the back end. For those who don't know Mreader, you don't have to know anything about it. You don't tell your students. They have no idea. They just press search. Oh, here's the book. It shows up in their Xreading history. We don't know any of their reading data, but if they take that quiz, again, it's the Mreader quiz, but taken in Xreading, if they pass that quiz, they get credit for the book. Okay, so it means, again, schools can integrate their physical and digital books. Okay, the last couple minutes, I want to talk about some new features we've added. We're constantly trying to improve the system, getting feedback from teachers, seeing what they need. Also, for example, teachers wanted to be able to give students goals in Xreading, so they can now do that. You can choose whether it's number of words or number of books. Number of words is usually better. I'm going to say 50,000 for an assignment. I create the goal. Now, a student, when they go to their homepage, they're going to see how close they are coming to reaching their goal. Okay, it's a little bit very, very minor. I don't know if we want to call it gamification, but if students can see visibly how far they are, it can be motivating. We've also created an Xreading certificate. A lot of some universities and especially high schools have been giving top readers or top readers in each class an award. Journals, when I created Xreading, I wanted to have quizzes because I thought students don't like writing so much. And if they have to write about every book, it's going to be demotivating. However, of course, there are courses in school where writing is important, and students want, or teachers want their students to write journals. So instead of doing it in a book, you can now do it directly in Xreading. So let's say a student reads this book, Breaking Free. The teacher has indicated you have to write a journal. The student will go to the journal tab, press add journal. The teacher can write some instructions like what kind of journal, how many words. The student types their journal. They save it. It shows up in their journal page. The teacher can then go to the edit icon here. They can give the student a grade. They can make a comment about the student's journal and save it. And then the teacher and student can both see the teacher's comment and the student's journal. This is just showing one student, one book, but of course, if there's a lot, it will all show up in the table. Pre-reading vocabulary. Those of you who are familiar with extensive reading probably know some of the books, especially low-level books, come with a glossary at the beginning of the book. This will help students better understand the story. However, most students just totally skip this page and they don't get the benefit. Therefore, we've added a feature called pre-reading vocabulary quiz that can be optional or mandatory, decided by the teacher. The way it works, this is now mandatory because you can see the start reading or vocabulary quiz before reading the book. This book has about 12 words. Students will be given a quiz. In this case, it's a word and a picture. They have to match. Once they get all the words correct, they can then go on to read the book. Okay? Again, it's optional if teachers want to use it or not. Speed reading. Again, I don't know if you're very familiar with Paul Nation, but he's been a big advocate of extensive reading combined with speed reading. He finds that they're more effective. That's what the research shows. When I say speed reading, I mean students are deliberately sitting down and reading a passage as quickly as they can, day after day after day, just for a few months, and it will quickly improve their reading fluency. Okay, so we've partnered with a publisher called Abax, and we have their 3 books. The way these books typically work, there's a reading passage. Students need to read as quickly as possible, mark their time, take a quiz, and then graph it. The problem is students forget to turn on the timer, they forget to turn off the timer, they forget to mark their graph. So we've integrated this into Xreading. Everything's done automatically. A student just has to go to the speed reading passage. They have a start button. We've added these little racing flags to hopefully encourage them. We've even added a ready, set, go. The student reads as quickly as they can. They get to the end, they press finish. Their time is automatically recorded. They then need to take a quiz. If they pass the quiz, their data is automatically put on the graph. Okay, so it just takes what's in those books and makes it just much more convenient and accurate. And a teacher can always tap on one of these and find out what exactly the student did. Some new features that we are planning to add for this year. I've showed you already the pre-reading vocabulary, the journals. The speed reading is now in beta. Interactive activities, the kind of activities that are at the back of the book, students will be able to do on Xreading. A leaderboard, if schools want to have competitions between their students, students can see where they are on the leaderboard. Xreading for independent authors, we've found that teachers can very often write their own books, and we can put those books on Xreading, and teachers will get royalties just like a publisher would. University major related graded readers, we have graded readers coming out for medical students, for those who need to learn the academic word list and things like that. Graded reader writing competition. We found some high schools in Japan that were having students write their own graded reader as a semester-long project. We invited them to put those books on Xreading. We made a competition out of it. And students were really excited, A, to be in a competition against their classmates, and B, when they saw students in different countries reading their books, students in Mongolia, in Japan, in Ecuador, they got very, very excited by that. And finally, an interactive dictionary. In this case, students will be able to tap on a word while they're reading, get the meaning specific to this context. We will then save their word to their personal word list. We'll indicate which are high frequency words they should devote time to learning low frequency words that they should ignore, and then we will give them games and activities for learning their words using spaced repetition, basically turning Xreading from a extensive reading platform more to a extensive reading and vocabulary learning platform. Okay, thank you very much. I hope I left enough time for questions, comments, suggestions, and if anybody wants a free trial, you can contact me there. So we have about 5 or 10 minutes for questions?
Yes, we do.
Great.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, while we wait for people to come up with their questions, well, I really thank you so much for introducing Xreading, and we're currently using Xreading for our university students, and we're actually promoting students to use it. Around 108 signed up for Xreading, and we really like the system. We haven't tried the speed reading component yet, but I really like that component because when I teach freshman English, I actually do in-class fluency reading and timing their 100-word reading, and to keep track of their reading fluency over the year. And students find that very useful. And, afterwards they would do a retelling. So adding a speed reading component to this system, everything gets digitized, and, information is on the on the Xreading side. I think that's a wonderful addition to the platform.
Thank you. Yeah, we did that specifically for for teachers like you who've been doing extensive reading and doing speed reading, and realize it's challenging. There's just too many places for a student to make a mistake. And then the other point is speed reading is very, very effective, and students, with extensive reading, students will improve their reading fluency, but it takes months and months because that's just the nature of it. With speed reading, I'm sure you've noticed within a few weeks that graph starts to go up, and it's very encouraging for students.
Yes. And I'm also interested about the leaderboard, because we haven't had that set up, but we really wanted to, because 108 students who sign up for Xreading, we would like to know. I would like them to see and looking at their data, it's amazing that they could read so many words. Let me pull up the data. I don't know if I could share.
You want me to stop sharing?
Yeah. Let me see. You don't need to stop sharing, but let's see. Entire screen, perhaps. And then share this one. This is our data. And because we have we gave them a limit of books to read, and look at the number of words that they've read. That's amazing. So that's why I really like the system, and I wish to promote it more among my colleagues and also university students. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we're finding more and more. Taiwan is probably one area where more and more schools are starting extensive reading programs and using Xreading. I think, again, because Stephen Krashen's had a big impact there. And yeah, I think more deeper understanding of the benefits. And we're hoping the Extensive Reading Foundation, which I don't know if anybody plans to attend, they're having their annual conference. We had it in Taiwan. The last in-person one was in Taichung. And the next one will be online, unfortunately, but teachers are all invited to join.
Oh, thank you. Do you have an I'm also interested in extensive listening, the feature that you also have, and I think that's wonderful for especially beginners. And so were there any publications on extensive reading that was done on Xreading platform that you know of?
Quite a few. I can search, but yeah, one of the other things, I don't know in your audience how many people are doing research, university teachers who need to do research. Xreading, besides being really convenient for teachers and students, is an ideal platform for anybody who wants to do research.
Yes, yes.
Anybody who's done research and extensive reading knows you have to collect so much data from your students and hope it's accurate. And not that students are going to lie, but they just forget how many words they read, which books they read, how many minutes. It's all tracked.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, almost anybody who wants to do research with extensive reading is going to use Xreading because it's so much easier. I'd say there's probably, at this very moment, there's probably 24 teachers doing research, and there's other research that's been presented. There are teachers doing research on extensive reading, extensive listening using Xreading. In fact, I'm going to a conference this weekend where I'm going to be a featured speaker along with a guy who's doing extensive listening, Brett Milliner, if you know him. But I can forward you his publications as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I'm the one who keeps asking questions. Yeah, because of this grant from the Ministry of Education, we would like our students to be at least B2 in terms of CEFR level, and because we're also promoting EMI courses on campus, and they need to be B2 in order to not in order to attend. It will be helpful for them to reach that level to take the EMI courses. So my question is, I know it's the readers are there's leveled, and do you know if they reached B2, what reading level is it, or
Sure.
B1?
Let me see if I can show you that. So right on the Xreading homepage, you can.
Oh, okay.
You don't even have to log in.
Oh.
Let me see, but it's not super easy to find. Let me see if I can.
And yeah, we're in the afternoon. My colleagues and I are having discussions. Are going to talk a little bit more on Xreading and how we're going to use the system, and if how many colleagues would like to try out the system for our freshman English courses. And so this information would be helpful.
Great. Yeah, just so you can see, if you go to the Xreading, this is the homepage. Anybody can come here. If you go to levels, this shows you the table I showed you before. But if you go to level comparison, you can see how these 14 levels compare to MReader, CEFR, which is I think what you're just asking about.
Oh, yes.
Here's the TOEFL. These are broad, very broad estimates, but you can see we go all the way up to C2.
Oh, wonderful. That's wonderful. This is perfect.
I'm just impressed you have students who read so high. In Japan, I'd say 90% of freshmen are right down here in the pre-A1 to maybe A2 if we're lucky. Yeah.
We started our English education from grade 3, and for a lot of cities from grade 1. So
yes, that's very important. I used to teach in Korea, and they changed it from junior high school to grade 3, and in 10 years, it made a tremendous difference.
Yes.
Japan's been a little bit behind in that, but hopefully we'll catch up. I'm so impressed when I come to Taiwan and how well people speak English.
We have a question in the chat.
Oh, question to you, though, I think.
Yes, Professor Chen. Yeah, it's from me. My question here is whether you use Xreading, because you mentioned that you use Xreading in your school. Do you use Xreading during class time, like Professor just described in the presentation during the class time, and then students will be asked to read, or do you just use it as some assignment for the students to do?
Well, this past year we've been using Xreading for outside of class. So this is for the whole university. Students from freshman to senior year, they could sign up for this Xreading, and it's funded by the MOE, so they don't need to pay. So they are voluntary, and they came and we set up an account for them, and they read on their own. And so we're not using Xreading in class, but this afternoon, my colleagues and I would like to talk about the possibility to incorporate Xreading in freshman English courses to assign like a percentage score for the semester, and use that like the information, their reading time and their words they read to to keep track of their reading, and give them a perhaps 5% of the score that goes
The
to
score
like
for
X
the,
reading.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's exactly my following question. If you use the X reading as some assignments or some other activities outside the classroom, do you assign scores to the activities? Because based on
I
my
think
personal
we
teaching
should.
experience, yes.
Yes, I
Yes,
think
right.
we
The
should.
students are quite less motivated as long
Yeah.
as the tasks or the assignments are assigned by the teacher. They just take it as they do not take it as extensive reading in the real sense. If we go back to questions description, extensive reading is related to two keywords. The first is large amount, and the second one is read for enjoyable reading. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just my related the following question here.
See.
And also the question here back to Paul. Hey, Paul, do you remember me? The Korean TESOL?
Oh, yeah, oh my God. Yeah.
The narrow reading one. Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for joining. So I would say,
and also welcome to Taiwan. Although the webinar takes place online. Welcome.
as soon as travel can start, I was going to Taiwan almost every 3 months before the pandemic. So hopefully I will come back. We're working with a partner called Tonghua Books, and they've been helping us to meet schools. I know the next speaker has to start in a minute. I was just going to say, I think Stephen Krashen and Richard Day, who both are strong believers in students will love reading and read for pleasure. I would say as brilliant as those gentlemen are, they've never actually taught freshman English in Japan and Taiwan. And I think it's students in their native language might learn to love English, love reading, but reading in a foreign language is really a lot of effort is involved. And I don't think our goal is to make students fall in love with reading. They should like it more than a typical language learning activity, vocabulary practice, grammar practice. But the idea that students are just going to become lifelong readers and fall in love with it, I don't think that's really what's going to happen. And unfortunately, many teachers feel that they've failed because their students aren't becoming lovers of reading. And I don't think that's what we really want to aim for. We want to aim for just giving them enough comprehensible input in a way that is as enjoyable as possible. And I also, if I'm invited to speak by Dr. Chen again, I can actually give a presentation on steps you can take to make your extensive reading program more successful. And you've already talked about two of them, making it required and giving them a little bit of time in class to read. Anyway, I know I've gone over time here. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you. We are 3 minutes past 11, which is allotted for our second session for today. The next topic is adventures in creating a choose your own adventure game for academic English, and it will be led by Suzan Stamper. Suzan has an MA in teaching English as a foreign language from Ball State University. She's a senior lecturer at the Center for Language Education at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. She has been involved with computer-assisted language learning intersection at the TESOL International Association, and she is the co-editor of the newsletter of computer-assisted language learning intersection on call for the TESOL International Association. Her research interests include blended learning and online language education, computer-assisted language learning, content and language integrated learning, and English for academic and specific purposes. Let us all welcome Suzan Stamper.
Thank you. So shall I try a screen share?
Yes, please.
And thank you very much for the promotion just now.
Yeah.
I am a lecturer, not a senior lecturer.
Oh,
so thank you. And I'm a contributing columnist to the on-call newsletter. But yes, it was very nice to be promoted.
sorry.
Okay, so let me share the window.
Okay.
So
Yes.
can you tell me you can see it okay? And just a reminder, I can't see any chat. I can't see people's faces right now. I encourage you, if you have questions while I'm talking, to go ahead and write something into the chat box. And then later someone can help me go back and see what the questions were. And I actually started off here with a little bit about myself. And then Jane, thank you. You've already said something, but just a little bit about me. So 39 years of teaching English for academic purposes at the tertiary level. So in the US, China, and then 18 years in Hong Kong. 10 of those most recent years are in Hong Kong. And 27 years with TESOL, being in the call intersection and being in the steering committee and the chair, and also the strand coordinator for the digital learning and technologies strand. But I want to say some takeaways. I mentioned that because I imagine some of you here in this workshop are maybe new teachers, younger teachers, maybe even master's students. We're at all different stages in our career. And if I would think about my experiences, I'd want to have a few takeaways from this. And one is to take advantage of opportunities like grants and workshops. So congratulations, you're doing one thing, you're already here. That's been a very important part of my journey as a teacher. And, I would say, I hope that you can apply these kinds of gaming ideas to teaching and learning. You don't have to do something as big as the project that we've worked on, but a lot of the things that I'll be talking about, you could apply in your own way. So, start off small, try some of the easier things. And, as you have more experience, then you can maybe find teams of people, work with other people, and explore bigger ideas. And part of this for me was to reimagine teaching and learning from what we have learned during this time of COVID. There are things that we did online that, I found to be quite interesting and wanted to keep. And this, gamification might be a way that you can do this in your classes. And I would say anyone can do this. So I would encourage you, start small. As you listen to things, jot down some notes, have some ideas, think about what you might be able to apply. Now, this is based on a job call presentation from just this last month with some colleagues. So we were a team of people working on the presentation, but more importantly, a team on the project. And what I want to do in this presentation is introduce you to a game that we designed. And in the abstract for this talk, I saw it as a journey. We packed up things, we had to map out what we're doing and what kinds of bumps and challenges, and then we got a guide. And I'll mention here that I'm quite fortunate in my workplace that the Center for Language Education is big enough and has enough projects going that they decided to hire its own instructional designer. So we have had a benefit of somebody dedicated to us. But I think a lot of schools do have that kind of technology support that you can get someone to help guide you if needed. Now, we're in the middle of this grant, so we're still in the revision process. So I want to spend, I'll introduce you to what we're doing, but also I want to give you some advice, some things that you might be able to apply. So a little bit about this course. In the Center for Language Education, there's a course called Lang 1003, and this is University of Science and Technology. Overall, the students have IELTS band 6, and this is a first-year Common Core course there are 2 semesters of English that students need to take. This was for a very new course piloted this last spring, a big course, approximately 41 teachers and 2,200 students and 117 sections. And we had a lot of innovations going on in the course. For example, a competency-based approach, blended learning, gamified electives. And I also think it's important to say that in Hong Kong, in the last 4 terms, only 1 term has been face-to-face. So we've been doing our classes in Zoom and having a lot of adaptation for teaching and learning online. So a little bit about the intended learning outcomes for the course. Some things, because it's academic English, we want students to develop their academic literacy skills, and that includes finding and evaluating sources for academic writing and speaking. So we have a library workshop. There's other search skills that they need to do. There are activities for synthesizing information and ideas from those resources, communicating in an academic community, and developing as a lifelong learner. So what I'm talking about with this grant is just a small part of the course. Altogether, it's 13 weeks for 3 hours a week. And, there are lessons every week. Students have other kinds of assignments. There are speaking tasks and writing tasks, but there is a self-directed learning task for electives in which students choose to work on some topics and electives. So a little bit more background, that's the course. And what we were doing when we were thinking about creating this course was to take advantage of a grant opportunity through our University Center for Education Innovation. So they had a call for proposals, and one of the options was to explore gamification and game-based learning. And you can see a quote from the call for proposals, a call for proposal to say, achieving effective learning by enhancing students' motivation and active engagement through a variety of active learning pedagogies. So that was our intent, to think of a way to gamify the electives. So officially, we're a team of 4 members, 4 teachers from the center, 2 leaders, 2 members, and we came into this project with a mix of skills. Everyone has had some experience teaching the kinds of things that were in the electives, or working on grants, or working on projects. 2 of us had completed a gamification certificate workshop. And then in addition to members, we also had support from our center's instructional designer, who I mentioned, who joined us this last year, and then also from the Center for Education Innovation. So we started planning this in fall 2021. It was piloted in spring 2022. We're revising now through fall, and then we'll run it for the second time in spring. And for anyone who's interested, because some of you might be here because you're interested in doing more with games, in our Center for Education Innovation, they had this timeline, the process for developing, and we've gone through the different stages and are now revising. But you define and plan and prototype and build and test and launch, and now we are then revising to go through some of the stages again. Now, the adventure part of the electives is just one of the choices that students have. The electives were set up that there was a learning to learn gateway, which was how do you learn effectively by yourself? How do you set learning goals? How do you know if you've achieved your goals? And asking students some questions about how they study. They needed to finish that gateway first. So that was about 30 minutes. And then they had a choice of 4 topics. There was a speaking elective for public speaking, an online resources elective to explore different kinds of websites for speaking, listening, grammar, writing, And then there was an academic writing elective. And the focus really for this talk is that adventure, the study abroad adventure. And we designed the electives to each take about 3 hours. So speaking should take about 3 hours of work, online resources, 3 hours of work, and so on. And then our school uses Canvas as a learning management system. So we set up the Canvas modules so that when students finished all the activities for one of the electives, then it triggered a badge. And this is just an example of a leaderboard in Canvas where you can see that all of the students completed the gateway. And actually our classes range between 15 to 20 in a class. So I'm just showing you a small shot of what it would look like on the page. And in the leaderboard, the teacher can see the students' names, but the students only see these aliases. So you can see kind of thankful elephant and astute eagle, but they can know where they are in relationship to their classmates. So they finished the gateway, then the Canvas site unlocked the other electives, and then they could choose to do speaking, online resources, academic writing, or the study abroad adventure. And we had 2 target dates, finish the first one by this date in the semester and finish the last one by another date in the semester. And one thing we were interested in doing this is if students would be motivated to do more than the required. I'm still looking through all of the information. As you can imagine, 2,000 students. It's a lot to look through to see how it went. But I am finding that in almost every class, there is at least one student who did more than the required. Some students completed all of the electives, some did 3. And so, that's an interesting idea for us is, if we make this more interesting, are there game elements? Would students be inspired to do more? So looking at the study abroad adventure elective, I wish I could see everybody's faces when I'm talking, because I'd like to ask if you're familiar with these choose your own adventure action mazes. This was something I remember it came out, it's been quite a few years ago, where it was a book, and I have a screenshot of one of the covers. And I really enjoyed the book. It came out when I was working on my bachelor's degree for teaching. And I remember, going through and you would read a scenario and it would say, if you choose, if you choose to turn right, go to page, 10. If you choose to go left, go to page 20. And every time you went through the book, the adventure could be different because based on your choices, you went to different places in the book. And, sometimes you had a successful ending, sometimes not such a successful ending, but I found it a very entertaining way to read. And there's also the Evil Landlady Action Maze. If some of you have been teaching for a while, there is software called Quandary, what was set up to do this. But I also know, like with Netflix, I was watching, there's an adventure guy where you can do it with video as well, where he's, trying to do something to survive, and you can say, oh, he needs to look for water or he needs to look for shelter, and you can make choices with the, remote for your TV and then, help him go through the adventure. So, I think this is kind of a common idea. We wanted to combine it with the teaching, objectives. So looking at the competencies, for example, there are many that we tried to incorporate, but the evaluation of information and sources, and also the mode of communication or multimodality. And so in general, we were trying to design the game to appeal to real life problems that students could encounter in planning for an exchange year, and will test their skills in problem solving and language communication. And, another thing I'll add is that with COVID, nobody's traveling anywhere and the study abroad programs have stopped. We're not trying to take place of that kind of study abroad experience, but it was a fun way to think about travel at this time. So the final activity for the Study Abroad Adventure, because the course includes multimodality, is to have students share their experiences as if they were, coming back to the university to tell others about their experiences. And we encourage their creativity. Possibly they could do a green screen. We suggested that they spend 60 to 90 minutes to create their work for this, and then to share it on Canvas and to read and respond to 2 to 3 classmates. So they could have done a blog or letter. We gave a word limit with hyperlinks and visuals. They could do a recording, 2 to 3 minutes, or a video. And there was variety in what students presented. So just some general points about starting the project. Because we're a team, we worked on a website called Miro to map out the plan. So this just gives you a little idea of what Miro looks like. And I would suggest, if you wanted to do any kind of this kind of action maze or choosing your adventure or any kind of project where students have choices and they're branching out, that you use some kind of software plan like this. Although you could draw it out on paper as well, but being able to visualize all of the paths and where the paths lead back to and so on would help. And the structure for each country was the same. We chose 3 countries. Information about the countries would take 30 to 40 minutes. So remember, the whole elective for this branch would be 3 hours. Choosing a program in the country would be 30 to 40 minutes. Program content would be 30 to 40 minutes, including reading a brochure. And then a communication, or really it was more of a miscommunication stage, 20 to 30 minutes, and then multimodal sharing. And just this yellow box here, congratulations, you've won a study abroad scholarship. One thing we wanted to include in the game is just, you don't have to worry about the time or the money or anything. It's like, congratulations, this is your opportunity. Now you can choose. We did consider with the gaming element if there should be, I don't know that we will revise in this way, but, could we add features like giving students a certain amount of money, and through the game, the money decreases, or there's something else maybe with points, something that they have to do in order to, go through each step. But we settled on just congratulations, you've won the study abroad scholarship. So the 3 countries we chose were Germany, Costa Rica, and Nigeria. We spent a lot of time thinking about countries and did not want the typical English-speaking countries, like to go to the UK or US or Canada, Australia, New Zealand. We wanted something that we thought maybe students would be unfamiliar with. So choosing different parts of the world. And because it's a University of Science and Technology, thinking about different kinds of programs that might appeal to these students. So cultural exchanges, sustainable vehicles factory tour for cars, right? Street art, sea turtle service learning program, national park, a university exchange, teaching English as a volunteer, startups, and Afrobeats culture. So there are variations in the sense of when they chose a program. For example, with the University Exchange, it was for a semester. With the Sea Turtle Service Learning, it was 4 weeks. So part of what the students had to choose was how much time. They had to think about, did they meet the requirements? Maybe there were different living arrangements. The program, and these were all imaginary programs, but we did look at some that were, we looked at in the countries for some things that students could do, but then we made up. So we created brochures for programs. And then they could choose to live in with a host family or in a hotel or with a hostel. So at this point, I'm going to try to switch to Miro. So just to show you, Miro is a whiteboard that can expand. So what we did is we used this as a collaborative space for the teachers who are working on the game. And we, had the branch of the basic part. And then we developed different countries. So you can see, like in Costa Rica, things that were planned. And then just an example of how the communication went. So, having game elements, but wanting to teach them to pay attention to things, to think about culture. So you might think, why are they, why are we doing like choosing clothes for the day? But there were things in the materials that talked about the weather. Would they make a choice, what's appropriate or not? And you can see that it circles back. So if they choose something, it gives them some advice. They can choose again. In this case, they can choose to eat breakfast, or they're late to a friend and they have to rush. And then what do they do when their friend arrives? What kinds of conversations they might have? We have an example of, how would you greet a female friend and what to do? So, some things cultural, chatting with the professor, a male professor, a male teacher, what would you do? But then, it's like the idea of language learning, will you make a mistake in using a word that doesn't have the meaning that you think it does? And so in the game, they would choose an option, right? And then they might learn, oh, you made a mistake. What are you going to do? Are you going to run away? Are you going to stay and learn more? Are you going to talk to the person? Are you going to ask? So the idea was like they're talking to somebody, they make a mistake, the person laughs. How do they respond? So trying to help the students to develop some good habits for lifelong learning. And then also through this process, meeting people, then they would get some tips on like pick up some clues about what to do later in the trip. And you can't see all of the details there, but writing it out in more detail. Sorry, we wrote out the script, and then from that map, thinking, well, how do you make it more interesting? Like beep beep beep, your alarm goes off. You have to decide. And then mapping out with the text what choices you go to. You can see this one says go to 38. So you have to move on to another place later down. So writing out the scripts was a little challenging, but having these notes to say, so you have the map, so you know which one, and some people might put a number by each box to identify, this might be number 3. And then, where it links to, but then we did this kind of to draw out and get an idea of the adventure, and then writing out the script with the specific notes. And then this was handy because we had the text already filled in, and it was easy then to pass and copy and paste into the software that we used. So there are things like leaving from breakfast. There's a place where it says, okay, you turn right and you run into one person, you turn left and you run into a different person. And so, all of these decisions, mapped out the adventure. So let me go back to how does this look? So, whoops, not that. So this is what Canvas looked like. And I thought just to show you with the program, so this is in the learning management system. So students would put in their name and, skip through a little bit of this because we wanted to, we have a study abroad coordinator who's telling students about the options, what countries they can go to. They can choose the country. I'll choose Costa Rica. we had links, so the students would open up, maybe tourist websites or something about the country. This is where they should explore. They could find out more about, with the links, like what would the weather be like, or what are some of the tips for culture, for interacting with people. So you can see like traveler tips, suggested itineraries. So we encourage students to explore. Then they could go on and then, learn. So depending on the country, the different kinds of links. And then they decide after they read this that they want to continue with Costa Rica or not. If they choose no, then they go back to the screen for countries. Again, the study abroad coordinator tells them about the programs. And so we have the Sea Turtle, the National Park, and the University Exchange. So just to give you an idea, we have so remember I talked about how we wanted students to think about what they read on the internet and to think about sources and be critical readers. So there's some tour companies, right? Because they're trying to decide about which national park they should go with. And so when they choose one, so, it might look very good, but it says its rating is not as high. The comments are nice but vague. And so here we have TripAdvisor. So they might know TripAdvisor, or it has 4 stars from a high rating from a well-known travel site. So maybe that's okay. Then information about the guides. We can see this says that it's one guide. He has a lot of experience and is certified. Do you think his English will be a problem? He has spelling problems, but his speaking could be clear. We might need more information to make a decision. So, we didn't want to say like this has to be the best one, but for students to think which one would they choose? Would they like to go with this one for what he says, see the options that he has, or would they go with this other team? So I just want to continue on with. So we have different options. So just different tours. Now we're in the national park. So we've researched, we're choosing the company, and now we are in the park, and we'll go to the Monteverde Cloud Forest Preserve. And students could read the guidelines from the preserve. And so this had a lot of clips about, or information about what they could do and not do. For example, you're thinking about the game elements. You look in your bag. Oh, your bag has 3 items that you should not take. What are they? Well, if they've read the material, they would know that a plastic bag is not allowed. And actually, one-use plastic is not allowed. So if they chose something that was not correct, then it doesn't do anything. And actually, insect repellent is the last answer. And this is set up so usually students have more than one opportunity to make a guess. And then after a couple of chances, it tells them the correct answer. So there go toilets. So are you sure of all the rules? Check all the don'ts. So, if we're saying don't take pictures of wildlife, don't pick flowers, don't use a camera flash, don't camp overnight. Oh, those are not exactly the don'ts. Try again. So don't feed the wildlife. That's right. Then we used some of these. I don't know if you'll be able to hear the sound. And since I can't see your reactions, you can't hear the sound. Well, it's okay. This is a BBC 360 video that could be embedded into the software. And so you're walking around and talking, and there are wild animals that are highlighted in the video, but it's like they're walking in the jungle. And then in another one, so there are different animals. So it's a video, And then we had a screen where there are animals hidden, although they may not look too hidden. So different birds that they might find. We have the sounds of a howler monkey, quite loud sounds. There's a sloth. Right. So they've gone through this experience. They've seen all these things, and then they go to a miscommunication stage, which I showed you before, and then the final one is to do the multimodal creation, to share what they've done. So I put up some screenshots, but it worked. I don't need to show those to you. So I'll go back to the software. So how did we create this? Now, we actually use something called Articulate 360. There's another kind of software called Twine. These both may take some time to invest in learning how it works. But I want to point out that these kinds of mazes can also be done with PowerPoint or with Google Forms. If you go online and do a search for action mazes and PowerPoint, you'll find videos that show how to do this, because what you're doing is just linking really one screen, and depending on what a student clicks on to choose, it goes to another slide. And so when we look at Articulate 360, you'll see that the way it looks in the program is like, the Miro board in a way, but it's also like separate PowerPoint slides where you have, the introduction leads to one, and then they have 3 choices, and it goes on. And you can see in the left-hand side, that's an example of how the script looked. So, I showed you earlier how we had the script with the different numbers and how it goes from 1 to 1. And so we're looking at the script and then pasting it into the slides in Articulate. But you could do this, like I said, with PowerPoint or Google Forms, something else. And the way that it works is, you can see on the right where we've got a situation, in this kind of choose your own adventure. The student can read and then choose, well, do I do A, do I do B, do I do C? And depending on what you choose, then it takes you to another screen. And many of them loop back, some end earlier, depending on your choices. So after the file was created in Storyline, it was moved to Canvas, which is SCORM. Don't want to go into that now, but it's fairly easy to do. We had the Articulate video that was moved to YouTube and then linked in a SCORM package to Canvas. And then students could run it, just like I was showing you a few minutes ago, within Canvas. And just to give you an idea of what we were doing in some of the other countries, in Germany, a teacher used one of those like Google Maps or YouTube walking videos, where you could walk through a city and see the art, or you could look on a map and see the historical places. And the Costa Rican one, for the Sea Turtle Adventure, there were brochures about what they would learn and their responsibilities. And in order to see if they're able to do it, they would click that they're willing. Are you willing to get your hands dirty and do some hard work? Yes, I'll assist in putting identification tags on the turtles. I'm able to walk up to 8 hours a day, or work approximately 40 hours a week. Well, if they didn't choose that, then it says, well, you don't meet the requirements. Maybe go choose something else. So they're reading a brochure to learn about it, what they would do. And then there's some kind of activity where they decide if they're really suitable. Same kind of thing for the university exchange. They had choices. I showed you the one about choosing the different items for the bag, and then also in the cloud forest. So a little bit more about Canvas. As I mentioned, it was uploaded as a SCORM package. If you're doing something like this as teaching material, there are issues with having it as a ungraded assignment. It was a lot of work, and students were answering a lot of questions, but it really wasn't possible to track one score to put into the grade book in our learning management system, or at least we decided it was too time consuming to try to figure that out to make it into a score that could be entered. So we were just using this as an activity, and then the students created something at the end, and that's what we looked at for the final task. We had to spend time testing and debugging. There are sometimes broken links or buttons or triggers that were missing. We learned with Canvas, and this may be true also. I think you can upload it into Moodle, other learning management systems. And again, if you're using something like PowerPoint or Google Forms, it's just the process of making the link into your learning management system. But with us, with the video, it's small window size, and it's not possible to store the interactive data. And we also set it up so that students, because they put in their name and they're going through the process, the program recognizes when they come back and they can continue from where they were last. But we don't know why, but some students complained that they lost their place. So they work on it and then come over and it would take them back to the beginning. We don't know the reason for that yet, maybe because they were using incognito browsing, but it should work even if they change devices. But that was something that we still need to work on. Some other challenges, and saying as a teacher, one thing that I think is a struggle is making that distinction between really what is a lesson and what is a game. I mean, you can go too far with a game where it's all just fun and not really necessarily learning something. But sometimes a game-like lesson still becomes too much like a lesson. And I found that, sometimes it was quite challenging to think, how do you tie that into the reading skills, tied into what they might learn about library skills? How can they apply that but make it game-like? And so one thing that we are facing as a challenge still is to incorporate more game elements, make it less like a writing lesson or a reading lesson, but make it game-like, and more interactivity. We also had a challenge because of the different writers. They're very different in content. I don't know if that's good or bad. One thing that we still need to do is to look at students' reactions to the different countries. What we did is, I'll say I worked on Costa Rica, in part because I'd actually been there. So, a lot of the photos and things in Articulate were, or some of the photos at the end anyway, were from my own camera. And we did have the advantage, one of the teachers had been to Germany, so he was able to bring what he knew about Germany to the situation. So the difference in the content, that could be good because it makes every branch of the game interesting, but then how do we make sure that it's of a similar level of difficulty, and one branch maybe isn't easier or harder than others? And you could see from even when I was doing the example, it is possible students can skim and not really read and do things, because it's clickable, A, B, C, you're clicking on a button or clicking on a spot. Do we know that they've really done something? If you would choose to use software like Storyline, it does take some time to learn the software and to know its functions and strengths and limitations. You can decide on a graphics theme. And interestingly, a lot of the photos within the video were already in Storyline, so free for use within Storyline. So if, searching for Germany, there were photos of Germany in Storyline that could be used. Very technical sort of piece of advice is be very careful with your updates and changes by creating separate project files. So renaming a file each time to show the latest version. And if you wanted to use software like this, there are lots of examples and tutorials out there. And it can be used in different learning management systems, as I said. And I thought you might like to see examples of what students created in that final stage of the adventure. And one thing I was impressed by was how many students actually used some German or use some Spanish to engage with their readers. And so, looking at, so these would be examples of the ones that did blogs to share. They're asking questions like, what comes to your mind when you think of Germany, its history, the people, do you think of sausage or beer, street art? And I was really impressed with how students put themselves into these imaginary situations and really spoke as someone who had experienced it. So, I studied there last year as an exchange student, and the student on the left saying the trip was marvelous and enriching. During the trip, I visited lots of cultural heritage sites. So they were really able to immerse themselves. Now, some did videos. What's interesting, I can see from this screenshot that they actually did more than one branch, more than one program. They only needed to do one program to get the 3 hours, but some from their writing, you could see that they had gone to more than one program link within a country. Just again, the language, putting themselves into that situation. During the highlight of my trip, I explored the forest and was constantly surprised by how magnificent nature is. And thinking about lifelong learners, I feel grateful that I get the chance to explore major technology startups in Nigeria as they show how computing technology could greatly impact the world we live in. And I'll go to the bottom here. The trip to Nigeria this summer was such an unforgettable experience for me. It broadened my horizons in this wonderful place. Seeing people so passionate about their careers and their country's future, it made me believe everyone can make a difference and improve the state of our society. So like in this case, for the startup, they read some news articles about people doing startups in Nigeria, and you can see they actually acted like they met the people and learned from the people in the articles. Talking about the different animals they saw. I like this, applying it. So Costa Rica captivated me. The life philosophy in Costa Rica, which is Pura Vida, resonates with my ideal life a lot. Pura Vida means we should live our lives to the fullest while taking care of our minds, bodies, and souls. Some really nice messages, especially at this time. And thinking about the titles in their blogs or in their videos, they, did a good job of trying to, engage the reader, engage the audience. As remember, they're sharing this with students who might want to do a study abroad. So it's an unforgettable exchange, or get lost in Costa Rica's nature. A beautiful mess is related to a part of the art tour that has lots of pictures that the students can walk through. So a beautiful mess in the sense of just an art alley, German walk that changed my mind, a thrilling experience. A small step out of comfort zone, a big step for self-development. And the students were what I could see is they didn't just copy what was in most students didn't just copy what was in the adventure. They did some research. So a student went out and looked at more things about food and found a recipe to share, and they were supposed to respond to each other. So there are a lot of responses like, the blog is intriguing, I want to try the food. And I liked how this student for Costa Rica put herself into the picture. So she did, background, like she's in Costa Rica, and then her face. And just an example of some of the other comments, a funny one to me was, I'm not a big fan of animals, so I was content to just read your blog. But even with the students responding, some of them took that role of, I actually went on adventure too. The place I have visited, Germany. Yours seems interesting. So if nothing else, just to raise awareness of the world for our students. And I was especially touched with this quote. So still going through a lot of the feedback. In the midterm evaluation, we asked about blended learning activities. And the electives at that time were number 4 out of 8. But then later in a reflection, one of my students wrote this, that, it's important to think out of the box. In Asian society, very often learning just from the books. Yet in this course, I got a chance to explore overseas learning and the self-directed learning elective through interactive games like I am playing a role-playing game. After this course, I would continue thinking out of the box and create things that are new and interesting. In a nutshell, I would say that I will practice more on advancing my communication skills and be braver to step out of my comfort zone. And I think in this kind of first year university course, this was a good jumping off spot for students, right? To start to be more active in their learning and to think about how it applies to them and what they want to do in the future. So I'll repeat the takeaways. I hope from this, even though Articulate is kind of a rather challenging software, that you can imagine taking advantage of opportunities. If you do some kind of grant, very often there's support that's available to help you through this. And then to think about maybe how to apply some of these games, adventures, some of these tasks with choices, to make teaching and learning more interactive. Just to imagine what we can do from what we've learned in COVID. And I'll say anyone, I think, can do this, and I encourage you to try. So let me stop sharing and see if you have questions.
Thank you so much, Susan. That was amazing.
You're very kind.
That was a lot of work. I mean, writing out the storylines, the different branches, and
so it was a team of 4 people.
Uh-huh.
So like I said, 3 of us, and we did, we're halfway through the grant. It is a 17-month grant. So, I mean, it does make a difference when you have support from your school or, government to do this kind of thing. So we did have some time allowed in the fall semester to develop. And as I said, each teacher, one teacher did Germany, I did Costa Rica, another teacher did Nigeria. But the hardest part was probably when the instructional designer came in to help with the Articulate. I think that was the biggest challenge. Okay, sorry. Don't know if people have questions. I see.
Do you have any questions in the audience? I've shared the some links that you mentioned. One that's
Miro and
Articulate there's Articulate 360 and then Storyline.
Yeah, I think they're more or less all in the same package. But for people just starting out, like I said, look at some videos, how to do action mazes with PowerPoint or action mazes with Google Forms. You can start off with something rather simple first and see how it goes. Paul's nodding his head. Paul's done something similar.
Oh, yeah.
Question: Did you? Because I noticed you put up Choose Your Own Adventure. I guess that was kind of one of your inspirations for this.
Right. When we were applying for the grant and thinking about the electives, that was kind of the inspiration because 2 of us teachers, older teachers, remembered how fun, like the Evil Landlady Action Maze was, and the Choose Your Own Adventure books, and yeah, I mean, I don't know how popular they are in other parts of the world or other people's experiences, but you do have options, like I mentioned in Netflix. You have those. You can choose.
Did you have were you able to show your students those books or an online version of those books so they could experience what you had experienced before?
We did not, but again, the whole semester was online, and this was considered part of their self-directed learning. So it really wasn't teaching. Although with your reading,
we have. We have Choose Your Own Adventures on Xreading now. Marcos Benavides, if you know Marcos Benavides, he wrote them.
Okay, so that's a beautiful marriage of like the reading and the game, the adventure. I was a teacher when I first was introduced to them, but I bought several. I thought they were fun.
They're fun, yeah, and students like them.
Jane, are they popular in Taiwan?
I had to purchase these books on Amazon and get them sent to Taiwan. But I haven't. Yeah, but I've watched Puss in the Puss in Books on Netflix. That was a Choose Your Own Adventure Netflix series, and yeah. After you selected a certain choice, you wanted to go back and look at what the other option would lead you to.
And I will say, with the Choose Your Own Adventure books, they are written for a younger audience, mainly.
But it's suitable for Taiwanese students, university students as well.
Right. But when you think about fluency and repetition, going back to do the game again or to do the book again is not a bad.
Yeah.
It gives them a chance to recycle and to think again about, what's happening.
Absolutely.
Even if you have a successful ending, it's fun to go back and see, like, what happens if I make all bad choices,
I know.
in the same place. It's engaging, and that's what we were hoping to do.
Yeah, so my question was, if I selected the 3-star one instead of the 4-star one, the travel agency, would I end up in a wrong place in Costa Rica?
No, that was part of the challenge, because if you can imagine, the branching for this could just become really out of control.
Yeah.
The main form of the branching was in the miscommunication or communication stage. That had a lot more of the branching and the choices. Overall, though, it's you go in, you have 3 choices of countries. You go into a country, you have 3 choices of programs. Within the program, there's less of that ending up in a different place. So like with the tours, the feedback was more on what did they notice about the language and the details, and just gave some suggestions, what they should think about. And I tried hard not to say negative things about a particular tourist company. I mean, these were made up ones, right? But
you could go to Google comments and add the bad ones in.
But these were made up, mostly made up. But I wanted to make the point. Even with the guy, his written text, he had grammar mistakes, but he could still be a great guide. It's just that the person consuming that tour needs to decide what's important. Do they want to, have a person with very good language, or do they want to be with a larger team of people, or do they want someone with more experience? So if you really look at those 2 tour companies, the man with the poor English has a lot more experience than a lot of the younger ones with good English. So it's not like there's one correct answer. It just has students to think about possibilities, I hope.
Yeah.
But once they got to the forest, then it's the same sort of adventure inside.
I see. Well, yeah. I like the 3-star and 4-star, letting them choose, and with all these information. So have you because Xreading, you get to see how many words are read. What about the Choose Your Own Adventure?
Yeah. So there are ways to track answers within Articulate, as I recall, but it was a very complicated process that this was a small part, basically like a 3 hours of a 13-week course.
Yes.
And it wasn't practical to spend that much time to sort that all out.
Yeah.
So that's why we did it just as completion, earning a badge. And then for each of the electives, there was sort of that sharing section. So if they chose writing, then they shared some writing.
Yeah, the students' blogs are amazing.
So we worked on multimodality in the course, and it was really nice to see how they did design and thought about placement and graphics. And yeah, I think students need to know that now.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. It's wonderful. I wish you could blow this up into an EVO workshop of 5 weeks. But yeah, the amount of work and the storyline building and the game element, these are all the things that we we'd love to know more about. And what a wonderful choice for it to be in the academic English self-directed online course. And
Well, thanks.
thank you.
And I just want to repeat, I mean, your participants, our participants are a little quiet here. I don't know if a lot of you are students or young teachers, but really encourage you just to take advantage of opportunities and to explore and create. And this is how you can end up doing something. I mean, I'm in awe of Paul with all that he's done. I know I couldn't do that, but we start small somewhere, right?
Yes.
And then that's how we learn the skills to do these things for our students. Okay.
Thank you. And we've reached the end of our webinar. Thank you very much, Susan. And thank you, Paul, for this wonderful morning. We've learned so much from you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. And we have a survey that is shared in the chat, and we would like your input so that we could offer more webinars that of your choice of topic. Thank you so much for participating with this morning, and we hope to see you again in our next best webinar series. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you,
Right.
Paul.
Hope to
Thank
visit you
Suzanne.
in Hong Kong and in Japan.
Yep, I'm
Really
saying
nice.
the same thing.
We're very close.
Very close. Yes. Love to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.